Hello dear viewer, Merry Christmas. I do hope you're having a great time, and if not, you are about to, because I have a big Blu-ray collection update. I've got loads of films to recommend to you that hopefully you can take into the new year and discover some great films. As well as saying Merry Christmas to you all, I also want to take the opportunity to say thank you for watching my videos and supporting the channel this year. And also a thank you to the people in the industry that make this whole thing possible. The people that are working at all of the Blu-ray labels, bringing these fantastic releases to us. It's very easy to take for granted that all of these great Blu-ray discs exist. And I'm hoping that we can keep things going as they are. The industry feels like it's at its strongest, even though people are saying physical media is dying, etc. I do believe we're in a golden age of films on physical media, and hopefully all of the films I'm about to talk about highlight this. I have so many films to talk about here, so it's going to be a bit of a long one. Get yourself comfy, pour yourself a nice drink, and let's talk about some films. First of all, I've been doing some catch up on some of the 4K releases that have come out this year. There are just so many releases, it's impossible to keep up with everything, but I'm trying to, make amends for the ones that I've missed. This one I missed when it came out, but I'm so glad that I finally got it. It's The Truman Show, the Peter Weir movie starring Jim Carrey about this guy who, his whole life is a TV show. And he doesn't know it, but then things slowly start to unravel. And it's a film that makes you question life itself. On this rewatch, it's hard to deny how great this film is. And it's so accessible. I think anyone could watch this and get something out of it. Now, the 4K release is a huge surprise. I'd heard people say that this is a good disc, but honestly, the film looks incredible. And the older Blu-ray presentations of this from 10, 15 years ago did not look the best. They looked pretty rough even at the time of release. And side-by-side comparisons, this just blows the old one out of the water. It's an incredible 4K disc and one that will almost certainly be making my best of list when it comes out very soon. A 4K disc that recently came to the UK is Rio Bravo, the film from Howard Hawks, classic Western, one of my favourites, and I was so happy to revisit it on the 4K. This came out in the US a while ago. It didn't have a slipcover in the US, whereas we got a slipcover in the UK. I don't know how that works, but it's a nice surprise. It also comes with the older Blu-ray, which I don't think the US disc does, because that had no special features on it as far as I know. We do get the features on the included Blu-ray, which is a nice touch as well. The film is set in the American West in this small town that is due to be taken over by nefarious forces. And this small group of people have to try and defend the town from these bad guys. It's a story we've seen over and over again in cinema, but this is probably one of the originators, certainly one of the most influential ones of this story. Hugely influential on John Carpenter, who loves Howard Hawks, a big influence on Assault on Precinct 13. This film was also loved by the French filmmakers of the New Wave and the critics at Cahiers du Cinéma because, you can tell that they would love this because it's a film that's very light on action. In fact, most of the film is just people sat around talking, developing character, having these complex relationships, but also supporting one another. And yeah, it makes sense that the French would love this. And I just think when you look at a lot of the Westerns that came out in the 40s, 50s, and even into the 60s, this was really refreshing and hugely influential. The film looks beautiful on the 4K. The film is quite softly shot and lit, so it doesn't look super sharp all of the time, but the colours look beautiful. So it's not going to be like a reference quality classic film to show off your system, but in terms of being authentic to how the film should look, it looks beautiful, and I'm very happy with the presentation. Sticking with Westerns, in the UK we recently got a release of Jango, the Sergio Corbucci film on 4K. This is from Cult Films, who I'm not overly familiar with. I'd had some of their discs in the past, which to be honest weren't that great. There was a Fellini Juliet of the Spirits disc from years ago, which was actually pretty terrible when you compare it to the Criterion. Now, this film got a release in the US from Arrow Video on the 4K. Now, I hadn't seen that disc, but Everyone that I'd spoken to had said it was incredible and the presentation was beautiful. So when I saw this was getting a UK release, I had my fingers crossed that we would get an equally good presentation, and I was pleasantly surprised because this looked beautiful. Now, obviously, I haven't done a one-to-one comparison between this and the Arrow because I don't have that disc, but for me, this looked great, and it was just a pleasure to have it in such good quality on a UK disc. The film is iconic. Franco Nero as Jango pulling around the coffin in one of the muddiest towns in any Western that I've ever seen. The film just looks so bleak at times, and it's really expressive, which is not something that you saw a lot in American Westerns. It was really the Italians that were really playing with heightening the emotions and the environments for these Western stories. In this set, you do also get a feature-length documentary called Django and Jango with Quentin Tarantino as advertised on the front. It's mostly a talking heads documentary where Tarantino basically talks about his love of the spaghetti westerns and Corbucci and this film in general. There's also a booklet inside to accompany the disc as well, and it comes in this case, which is not one of the rigid cardboard cases, which is a bit of a shame because I don't know if you can tell on camera, but my one did come dinged and damaged. That is a minor note though. The film looks incredible. It's such a fun western, one of my favourites, and it's great to have it here. Now for something a bit neo-noirish, it's Red Rock West. This is the fantastic collector's edition from Umbrella Entertainment in Australia. Seriously, the presentation on these editions is just amazing. They come with the rigid hardbound case with fantastic artwork. You get the film inside with a slipcover, and you get a booklet and some posters and extra stuff. The film itself is classic 90s neo-noir. It's got Nicolas Cage, Dennis Hopper, directed by John Dahl, with a story that is just, quintessential noir. Cage's character ends up getting wrapped up in this criminal plot where he's not really meant to be there. He gets mistaken for someone else, but he ends up going along with it anyway. And of course, this brings some very serious consequences for him. It's a film that I almost want to describe as Lynchian. Even though it isn't really a David Lynch film at all, I think that's probably just because it's got Nicolas Cage and Dennis Hopper, who of course are famous Lynch collaborators. This film is coming up to 30 years old now, and they just don't make films like this in the 2020s, and I really wish they did. This kind of film has just almost completely disappeared, and I'd love for this kind of stuff to be made again. But for now, we can enjoy it on these incredible Blu-ray editions. Now for something a bit strange. Strange Way of Life, the Pedro Almodovar short film starring Ethan Hawke and Pedro Pascal. This is a short film getting its own Blu-ray disc, which doesn't happen a lot. The film is only half an hour long. This is not the first short film from the filmmaker to get its own Blu-ray, and I wish this was something that was done much more. It was at a much cheaper price point as well. I think it was £6 from HMV when I got it. So I was happy to pick it up because I love the filmmaker. There's not really any way to describe this film other than a very gay western, which is not a disparaging comment at all. And in fact, Pedro Almodovar was originally tipped to direct Brokeback Mountain decades ago when that came out. And he still hasn't made the transition to doing a feature-length English language film yet. But it feels like it's coming because he's done quite a few short films in English now. And he just knows style. He knows how to direct a film, give it such a unique stamp. Even though this is clearly inspired by the likes of Johnny Guitar and some of those subversive, revisionist westerns. So it's great to look at. It's a good film, nice short watch if you don't have the time for a full feature. I highly recommend it if you can get your hands on it. Sticking with Mr. Ethan Hawke now, I have Zeros and Ones, the Abel Ferrara pandemic-made movie, which I wasn't going into with high hopes, but I actually think this is one of those films that could date very well and in the future could be sort of reappraised as a digital masterpiece. Although I won't go too far in saying that because, the jury is still out. Ethan Hawke plays a soldier who is working on this anti-terrorism job, but his brother is kidnapped, captured, and he wants to rescue him. Now, you might be mistaken looking at the cover of this that it's some big action movie. It isn't. This is a very philosophical story, a Heart of Darkness-esque story, which has the COVID pandemic, tied into it. It also helps that at the time the streets were completely clear at night, so they could just film whatever they wanted in the streets. And the film has a very lo-fi digital aesthetic to it, almost like Michael Mann with all of that digital noise in the image. Normally that kind of digital noise is the kind of ugliness you don't want in your image, but if it's the aesthetic choice of the filmmaker, it can really work, and I think it does in this film. This is not a film for everyone. It's not one that I think you will fully get on first watch, because I don't think I did. I'm going to have to spend more time with this film, but for now it has really intrigued me. And like I said before, I think this has the potential to be seen as a really great film. I just need to get my head around it a bit more. Also, I should say, this is the German Region B Blu-ray. It doesn't have a UK release, so I had to get it from Germany, but it was only about €5 on Amazon, which was an absolute steal. So I'm happy I was able to get it, because I think, it's a fascinating film. Now, because it is Christmas, I have a Christmas film to talk about. Maybe not one that gets talked about enough, and I think that is the case actually. It's Remember the Night, starring Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray. It's directed by Mitchell Leeson or Leisen, not too sure how to pronounce that, sorry. But it is written by one Preston Sturges, who after this film would go on to start directing his own films. And, he is one of the masters of the era. And this film is a Preston Sturges film through and through. Like the DNA of the script, you can just totally tell it is one of his films. That's not to say it isn't directed brilliantly by Mitchell Leeson. And of course, Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray, brilliant chemistry between the two. We would go on to see them work together, of course, famously in Double Indemnity. But they are perfect in this film. It's a classic romance story, two people flung together who at first, don't really get on perfectly. It isn't an instant romance. And then spending more time with one another, they begin to grow feelings. It's also set at Christmas. It's a great Christmas film. I think if you can get your hands on it, or if you can find it online, it's one to definitely watch over the next few days. This is the fantastic Indicator Special Edition, which I think came out either last year or earlier this year. I'm not too sure. If you're in the United States, or if you have access to the Criterion channel, I do believe this is streaming on the Criterion channel right now. So yeah, if you have access to that, do check out this film. It's a great watch. Next, I watched Casino Raiders. This is the Eureka Entertainment Blu-ray that came out recently. This is a film directed by Jimmy Hung and Wong Jing, starring Andy Lau and Alan Tam. We follow these Chinese expert gamblers who are recruited by a US casino to help them stop these cheaters at their casino, and they're losing tons of money, so they need help. They go there and they end up being wrapped up with the Japanese Yakuza, so they get in trouble, and that's where a lot of the drama is in this picture. I know that the gambling film was a big thing in Hong Kong cinema in the 80s and the 90s. And I was expecting this to be one of those gambling action films, lots of martial arts, etc., because I didn't know much about it. In reality, there's very little action in here. It's quite melodramatic. And unfortunately, I think the film sort of loses itself in the middle. It starts to drag somewhat, it's a real shame, because it's starring Andy Lau, who's one of my favourite actors at the moment. He is not featured enough in this film, in my opinion. I think he should have been the main focus, whereas the film sort of swerves to focus more on Alan Tam's character. There's a lot of great stuff in this film, don't get me wrong. I just felt like, I just wish it was a bit different in certain aspects, and I think it would have been a lot better or more suited for me if that were the case, particularly more Andy Lau. Of course, it's a stacked release from Eureka though. Great commentaries as always from the regular contributors, and it is a beautiful presentation on the disc. So one I'm happy to have in the collection, particularly because I think I need every Andy Lau film on Blu-ray. And this is getting me one step closer to that goal. Moving on now to one of my other favourite Blu-ray labels, a label that has had such a fantastic year of releases. course, it's Radiance Films and The End of Civilization set. 3 films from Piotr Shulkin. First of all, I love this artwork. It's so striking. And I hadn't seen these films before, but I have fallen in love with these films. They are a set of Polish science fiction films, which, as you would expect from a lot of Polish cinema at the time, they are also quite political and saying a lot about the state of Poland at the time the films were being made. It's been such a great year for fans of Polish cinema on Blu-ray because we have the likes of this, we had the Andrzej Żuławski set from Eureka, we had the Jerzy Skolimowski releases from various labels. So there's been a lot of exciting stuff this year, and this one definitely is added to that pile. I'd say with this set, it's best going in blind if you know nothing about the stories and what the films are about. But if you're a fan of those filmmakers that I just talked about and other Polish filmmakers like Wojciech Haas, etc., you are going to like this set. And there's a ton of great special features. Daniel Bird features on here. He's like a Polish film expert. Like with the other Radiance box sets, brilliant packaging, booklet inside. I can't show you the artwork on the back because there are some boobies in the artwork, so that's a treat waiting for you when you pick this up. It's an all-round brilliant set, and I'm just so thankful that this kind of stuff is getting a physical media release. I don't know how I would have discovered these films otherwise. If we lived in a world of purely streaming, the likes of these films would just get lost amongst all the noise on the internet. So I'm so glad I can hold this in my hands and discover some great films. Another great recent release from Radiance and a discovery for me was Le Combat dans l'Île. This film was made during the period of the French New Wave, and it feels a part of that film movement. We follow this couple played by Romy Schneider and Jean-Louis Trintignant. They are going through some difficulties, mainly because the character played by Trintignant is a far-right terrorist, an extremist, and in secret he is training to carry out some violent political acts. This is something that makes the film suited for both the politics of the time in which it was made, but also the politics of today, because what you see in this film is a scary thing that could be a reality at any point in time. And we've seen this kind of thing this week, just a few days before Christmas. Random acts of violence carried out by characters who are like what is portrayed in this film. And it is scary, it really is. Jean-Louis is brilliant in the role, and it leads into the character that he would come to play in Bertolucci's The Conformist. Though the film is dealing with heavy subject matter, there is a satirical, tongue-in-cheek, stylish nature to the film, which I think makes it very enjoyable to watch. And the film looks stunning. The cinematography is just amazing. And of course, with it being a Radiance release, it's stacked with special features and a booklet. It's one that I would recommend strongly to fans of French cinema, particularly the French New Wave, and it has been a major discovery for me this year. Next up, I've got Elegant Beast. This is the film from Yuzo Kawashima, written by one Kaneto Shindo, who we know from The Naked Island and Onibaba, etc. Kawashima is a director I'm not too familiar with, except for one film that I love so much, Bakumatsu Taioden. This is one of the very old Eureka discs, which is a great film if you can get your hands on it. It's such a shame that this is not in print anymore, but that's something for another day. Elegant Beast follows this family who are bad people. They are criminals, swindlers, they're trying to con people. They're just not good people. But like with any well-written film, even if a character is unsavory, you can still root for them and, want to see what happens for them. And I was hooked on this film. It's great seeing the interactions between all the characters. It plays on family dynamics. And it's a film that made me strongly think of the films of Yasujiro Ozu. Not because the films are thematically linked, but stylistically. They focus on the family unit. This film is mostly set in one apartment and it doesn't really move outside of the apartment. So it really is like a demented Ozu film, a much darker Ozu film. But that's only if I'm being derivative. The film is a great film regardless, and one that I would strongly recommend to anyone who can get their hands on this release. It's available in the US and the UK, so hopefully many people can get their hands on this one. Like with Radiance's other releases, great special features and a booklet, you know the drill. Their just caliber of work has been so high, and yeah, it's a great one. Now for something a bit different, the film Full Body Massage, directed by Nicholas Roeg. I'm laughing at the title because it is a ridiculous film name. It's starring Mimi Rogers, Brian Brown, and the film probably evokes certain images in your head. You probably think this is just a softcore movie. And you wouldn't necessarily be wrong, but there are certain things that elevate this film, particularly being directed by Nicholas Roeg. There's also a great exploration of a relationship at the centre of this film. Very conversational, very philosophical, but there's also quite a lot of nudity. So if that's the kind of thing you want, then you probably won't be disappointed by this. I wanted to have this film because I want every film from Nicholas Roeg. And yes, it isn't Don't Look Now, or The Man Who Fell to Earth, or Walkabout. But it has his stamp on there somewhere, and I think you can see it in this film. I think it's just buried in a lot of boobies, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. This is the Blu-ray from Unearthed Films through MVD in the US. It comes with this slipcover. The 2K scan looks great. It's a great presentation of the film. You don't really get much in terms of special features, but it's not the kind of film that I would expect to have, a making of documentary, etc. So Full Body Massage, it's not a masterpiece, don't get me wrong, but it's an interesting film from a brilliant filmmaker. Just make sure that if you have guests around, you might have some explaining to do if they see this on your shelf. Something else from the US now, it's Mondo New York. This is part of MVD's Rewind collection. This is a very shocking, subversive movie, as you would expect from the title. We follow this innocent-looking blonde girl as she goes through the New York underground scene, seeing all sorts of strange stuff. All of the subcultures which actually nowadays are more mainstream than they were at the time of making this film. There's a lot of unsavory stuff in here, but if you're one of those people that likes delving into that side of cinema, sort of John Waters-esque, disgusting cinema, this could be the kind of thing for you. There is some animal cruelty in here, which is not something I'm a fan of at all. So fair warning, if you don't like that kind of thing, this probably isn't the kind of film for you. And I think animal cruelty was probably more shocking back at the time of this release in the 80s, because nowadays with the internet, it's just not that shocking. It's just kind of like, why? For a film that is quite disgusting, the 2K scan on here looks beautiful. This is for a film that was very hard to see previously. I don't think it ever had a DVD release or a previous Blu-ray. I think you could only see it from rips of an old VHS tape. It's also stacked with interviews from the performers and the filmmakers in the film. You get the soundtrack CD, you get a poster, you get so much stuff, and it is a fantastic release. This next one is an MVD Marquee Collection release. It's the film Vile from director Taylor Sheridan. I think this was his directorial debut. He would go on to write and direct some great films, namely Sicario, Hell or High Water, Wind River. As you would expect from this artwork, it's a sort of Saw-esque torture film where all of these people are captured, and in order to escape and get their freedom, they have to inflict pain on themselves and one another. And the more pain that is inflicted, this meter keeps ticking up, and when it gets to 100%, then they will be freed. So while they're all trapped together in this house, they have to come up with new ways to inflict lots of pain. And it's pretty uncomfortable to watch at times. There is some good effects and some good, pain infliction, I guess would be the term. The only thing is, beyond what I've just described, there isn't much in terms of narrative or character growth or anything like that. So it's the kind of thing that by the end of the movie, you're just a bit exhausted after seeing all of this stuff. So Vile is a film that I wouldn't recommend to everyone. You have to be really into that sort of genre of films. But maybe if you like Taylor Sheridan and you want to kind of see where he started out, then you might want to pick this up. Otherwise, I would say steer clear unless, you like this kind of film. And then we have Scream Queen, the Visual Vengeance release starring Linnea Quigley. This was believed to be a lost film. This is from the 1990s, shot on standard definition video. So let me warn you, the film does not look very pleasing to the eye. that's just the nature of how the film was made. A lot of people won't even know who Linnea Quigley is, but to those people that do know who she is like an icon of slasher movies and horror movies. In the story, we follow this cast and crew of a movie where the lead actress dies, and then all of the cast members and crew members are brought together, and some revenge is carried out on all of them by a masked killer. It's very low budget. It's from the SD video era, so I think this is going to be for the fans of Linnea Quigley and this type of movie. Being SD, the film is only on a 480p presentation on the disc, but it is director approved, and on the Blu-ray there's tons of special features to get into, people talking about this film and the legacy of this film. I have to say that this is one of the films in my collection now that I think is one of the least seen on the internet. I think I went on Letterboxd and logged this, and it had been logged by about 30 people. So honestly, if you're into finding such niche rarities, regardless of so-called quality of the filmmaking, this is one of those rarities. It's also a region-free release, so no matter where you are, if you want to pick up this Visual Vengeance disc, you should be able to. So there you have it. That was everything that I've been enjoying in the last few weeks in the run-up to Christmas. Not very many Christmas movies, I'll admit, but a lot of films that I enjoyed, and hopefully you can take one or two of these as recommendations for things to check out. If you want more recommendations from me, then just watch the video that's presented on screen right now. Until next time, Merry Christmas, have a great time watching some great films, and I'll see you soon.